Okay, so like what if you could take your, messy notes and turn them into like a polished podcast?
It's a fascinating idea, right?
Yeah, like imagine taking meeting scribbles or
Mhm.
research highlights and transforming them into, I don't know, a full-blown audio discussion, you know?
Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today.
Google's NotebookLM
Exactly.
and how it's changing content creation.
It's wild. It's more than just reading text aloud. NotebookLM takes your notes, web articles, even YouTube videos, and it crafts this surprisingly natural conversation from them.
Yeah, and the articles I share even mention how it throws in ums and likes, almost like it's trying to mimic those little pauses we have in natural speech.
Yeah.
But before we get to the how that's even possible, let's break down what using NotebookLM actually looks like.
Okay.
It seems surprisingly straightforward.
User-friendly is definitely a good way to put it. You're essentially dragging and dropping your source material into the platform. It's designed to be accessible even if you're not,
Yeah.
a tech whiz.
Which is a relief, because I am very much not a tech whiz. But the real mind blower here is what's happening, right? Under the hood.
Yeah.
We toss around the phrase AI a lot these days, but NotebookLM is powered by something called a large language model. What does that even mean?
So in essence, it means this AI has been trained on a massive data set of text and code. Think of it like giving a supercomputer a crash course in human language and communication, right? This allows NotebookLM to not only recognize patterns in your notes, but to understand the context and nuances in a way that's eerily similar to how we think.
So it's not just spitting out words, it's actually understanding what those words mean, how they connect.
Exactly, and it uses that understanding to synthesize new connections, extract key themes, and even mimic those little quirks of human conversation. That's how you get those ums and likes you mentioned earlier.
Okay, that's both impressive and a tiny bit unnerving.
Okay.
But this whole large language model thing, is there a simpler way to understand how it learns to sound so human?
Imagine a child learning to speak. They don't start by memorizing a dictionary, right? They learn through exposure, repetition, and by observing how people interact.
Right.
Large language models work in a similar way, but on a much grander scale. They analyze massive amounts of data, identify patterns and relationships between words, and then use that knowledge to generate new text that reflects those patterns.
So it's less about memorization and more about learning the underlying rules and rhythms of language.
Precisely. And one of the key technologies that enables this is something called transformers. Think of them as specialized algorithms that help the AI focus on the relationships between words in a sentence, allowing it to understand context and meaning in a way that previous models couldn't.
So instead of just seeing a string of individual words, it understands how those words work together to convey a bigger idea.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting with NotebookLM. It's not just about mimicking human language, it's about using that ability to make information more accessible and engaging.
So it's not just about sounding human, it's about thinking and processing information in a way that's similar to how we do.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got this, super-powered AI that's basically fluent in human conversation and thought.
It's pretty amazing.
What can we actually DO with NotebookLM?
Yeah, that's the big question, right?
The articles mentioned it can pull out like key insights from research, even create study guides and FAQs.
It's true, yeah. And imagine this. You're prepping for this big presentation, but you've got stacks of research to get through, right?
Oh, I know that feeling.
NotebookLM can analyze those documents, pull out the most important points, and even organize them in a way that makes sense.
Okay.
Instead of spending hours sifting through papers, you're getting a curated summary of the most relevant information.
That's kind of brilliant for anyone who feels overwhelmed by information overload, which, let's be honest, is most of us these days. It's like having a research assistant who never sleeps. But I'm curious, the articles mention this AI host worrying about its job security while discussing AI as a speaking topic.
Aha.
It seemed a bit random.
And that brings us to a key point about NotebookLM. It can be surprisingly good at mimicking the flow of human conversation, but we don't have complete control over what it says.
Okay.
We can feed it information, but we can't script its every word or thought.
Which makes sense, given what we've just learned about how these large language models learn. It's not just parroting back information, it's actually processing and synthesizing it in real time.
Exactly.
So are those little quirks, like the AI host's job security quip, just part of the package?
For now, yes. And it's important to understand both the capabilities and the limitations.
Right.
For example, NotebookLM is currently limited to English.
Yeah.
It also always uses a two-speaker format with one male and one female voice.
So no customizing my AI podcast host just yet. Bummer. Though I do appreciate the commitment to gender balance. Speaking of limitations, one writer tried to trick NotebookLM by telling it to avoid certain phrases like deep dives and other related terms.
And how did that go?
Let's just say those AI hosts are really committed to their deep dives. Even with explicit instructions to avoid it, the phrase kept popping up,
Oh, no.
which, I have to admit, is both hilarious and a little unnerving.
It really highlights that while this technology is rapidly evolving, it's not perfect. We're still figuring out how to best guide its output and ensure it aligns with our intentions.
So it's a work in progress, but a fascinating one nonetheless. But even with those limitations, it seems like NotebookLM has the potential to be incredibly useful in a lot of different ways.
Definitely.
We've talked about research and presentations, but what about things like education or even just understanding complex topics?
Absolutely. Imagine using NotebookLM to create study guides,
Yeah.
right, that actually make complex subjects engaging. Instead of just dry summaries, you'd have these dynamic conversations that break down difficult concepts into, bite-sized pieces.
It's like having a personal tutor who can tailor the conversation to your specific learning style.
Exactly. And think about how this could revolutionize things like product documentation.
Okay.
Instead of wading through pages of technical jargon, you could ask NotebookLM to create like a conversational FAQ that walks you through the features in a way that's, easy to understand.
No more calling customer service in frustration. I like where this is going. So we started with this what-if scenario of turning raw information into engaging audio, and it seems like NotebookLM is making that a reality.
Yeah. It's still early days, but the potential here is huge. And it makes you wonder, like, if we can do this today, what will AI be capable of tomorrow?
Yeah, it's both exciting and a little bit daunting, right?
Yeah.
But for all its quirks, NotebookLM seems like a giant leap forward in making information more accessible and engaging.
It certainly challenges us to rethink how we consume and interact with information. As AI tools like this become more sophisticated, we have an incredible opportunity to use them to, learn, share, and connect with the world around us in ways we never thought possible.
It's like opening up a whole new universe of possibilities. So as we wrap up this deep dive, sorry, couldn't resist.
Nah.
What's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from this conversation about NotebookLM?
I think the key takeaway here is that this technology is not just about automation, it's about augmentation,
Okay, yeah.
It's about amplifying our own abilities to learn, understand, and communicate. As you experiment with these tools, I encourage you to think about how you can use them to enhance your own work, your own learning, and your own understanding of the world around you.
It's been a fascinating deep dive, even if I do say so myself. Until next time.